Chapter 5 Finding Your Voice. Heeding the Call, an End in Itself. The concept of creativity, along with terms like the creative process and creative expression, have become cultural catchphrases of late, especially in life coaching and branding circles. Social media platforms espouse the virtues of contributing one's unique gifts to the collective. Gone are the days of feeding the supply and demand of essential goods and services, earning a livelihood by putting one's nose to the grindstone. There is more emphasis than ever on cultivating creativity in academic and business arenas, if for no outcome other than increasing productivity. Similarly, the buzzword storytelling is firmly entrenched on the pop culture radar, hijacked from the literary realm by advertisers, political advisors, and propagandists. One cannot scroll through an Insta-feed or peruse YouTube without coming across countless videos on the chemical basis of persuasion inherent in storytelling. Nuances like appealing to pathos and ethos are distilled into well-founded propaganda techniques like the bandwagon or plain folks approaches. The thing is, rather than breaking down the mechanics of engaging and thereby persuading audiences, readerships, or platforms in order to transform them spiritually, the desired outcome is political alliance, box office gold, or making the bestseller list. In short, story has become the strange bedfellow of commerce, feeding consumerism. One could argue this turn of events is a far cry from the original function of storytelling in society. There is another way. I've often said that I change minds by touching hearts. Given that we humans learn more in the narrative realm than the didactic, as touched on in the introduction of this book, that we transform through conflict resolution and are wired for metaphor. Story was once the inherent means by which we transform. Humans are suckers for catharsis. By moving us, story transforms us individually, shaping our respective worldviews over time. By extension, story evolves us collectively, comprising our history. In previous chapters, we've explored how appealing to logos or ethos alone, debating, can be a dead-end road. Those at the receiving end of a soapbox sermon only dig their heels in more defiantly when faced with ideological or political persuasion. It is story that moves us, by engaging our emotions, leading to paradigm shifts. Simply put, we are the product of the stories we've been exposed to in life, just as society is the sum of its collective history. Sure, history is written by the winners, but the narrative that prevails determines the course of policy and social evolution. Unfortunately, contemporary usurpers of storytelling are not out to open hearts or minds, but pocketbooks. At the risk of coming across as elitist, I parse between the two motivations personally: mastering the mechanics of story in order to contribute redemption to humanity, and doing so for the almighty dollar. In circles that champion creativity as an end in itself, there is a great deal of lip service paid to finding one's voice. The word authentic often precedes the term voice. The call to action entreats us to marry our authentic voice, or alternately gift, with a sense of purpose. Only then can we contribute it to collective society in a fulfilling, meaningful way. By accepting the call, we are meant to discover the sense of purpose that leads to contentment. There are very good reasons that these seemingly lofty aspirations are becoming more and more mainstream. For one, millennials and Gen Zers have no interest whatsoever in contributing to the rat race. Disillusionment with the institutions that have failed us for centuries has led to a categorical rejection of the status quo. Institutions like patriarchy, imperialism, and capitalist greed have led to today's most pressing societal ills: exploitation, marginalization, and oppression, the ravaging of our planet's natural resources. Add to this well-warranted skepticism a climate in which more and more jobs are being automated, resulting in an ever more competitive job market, and the prospect of becoming a free agent or entrepreneur becomes yet more appealing. Nowadays, a 14-year-old kid can make a halfway decent film in his garage using Final Cut Pro, and he actually stands a chance of garnering distribution in the festival circuit. Similarly, self-publishing has toppled the monopoly the Big Five once held on the publishing industry. Everyone stands a chance in today's market. The playing field in publishing and distribution has been effectively leveled. The problem is, the markets are oversaturated with free agents who subscribe to the mantra, "He who markets best wins." In a not-so-commendable way, this model spawns entire generations of young people waiting for a lightning strike in social media. Insta-models have taken the place of the starlets that once strategically dined at the Derby, hoping to be discovered. The more redeeming outcome of entrepreneurial spirit and a focus on self-branding may well be that creativity, storytelling, and purpose via contribution have become accepted values in mainstream vernacular, along with the idea of finding one's authentic voice. As recently as 10 years ago, this was not the case. But what does finding one's voice really mean? Hint: it's more than mastering craft. It's more than hitting a stylistic stride. Finding one's voice is code for connecting one's craft with a sense of purpose as a contribution to our evolution. Since oral tradition reigned around the campfire pre-language, storytelling and art have cultivated tribal bonding due to the neurotransmitters induced. More importantly, they have yielded catharsis, epiphany, and enlightenment for the patron. In short, these outcomes are transformative and redemptive for the individual, and vital to collective adaptation. Let's go to the authority. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Maya Angelou is a true polymath. Her achievements in the publishing world and civil rights are only matched by her countless accolades, awards, and honorary degrees. Her most beloved work, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, chronicles a traumatic childhood. What renders her achievements all the more impressive is the fact that the very same trauma rendered her mute. For 5 full years in childhood, she did not utter a word. Once she found her voice, however, she never stopped sharing it with the world. Her example resonates for its universality. We all have a unique experience in life and a unique perspective. Whatever we glean from it is meant to impact the whole of the species. Existing thought forms are meant to be synthesized into new and novel ones that advance the cutting edge of human experience. Evolution has wired us with a drive, a desire, an urge, a longing to express ourselves and the experiences that have shaped us. On Underworlds and Chandeliers. Somehow I made it to the age of 36 before ever seeing the Phantom of the Opera. After dethroning the house guest that overstayed its welcome known as Cats, Phantom became the longest-running musical of all time. Since even phenomena like Les Mis and Hamilton have failed to steal the title. Still, I somehow managed to steer clear of it for decades. Oh, I knew tidbits about the novel-turned-musical. Certain plot points and details had been plucked from history, like the chandelier incident that fueled speculation the Paris Opera was haunted. I knew the story centered around a hideously disfigured French guy in a cool mask. I'd even sung the musical's most memorable love song, All I Ask of You, in a minimum of 2 weddings at the height of the cultural phenomenon. But only when the movie version premiered in 2004 did I experience the musical in its entirety, albeit on the silver screen. It rocked my world. The story was archetypally simple, to the point of bordering on campy melodrama, or perhaps more fittingly on operatic poetry. Its theme spoke to me profoundly as an artist. The parable was clear as day. A muse, the angel of music no less, literally haunts the Paris Opera House and Christine. The story painfully illustrates her complicated relationship with this muse, representative of a calling, the abiding of it, its function as a surrogate for connection, and the conflict that arises when true intimacy comes along. The story, its climactic sequences in particular, beautifully illustrate the excruciating struggle Christine faces when she finds herself torn between a deep-seated primal first love born of survival and the earthly connections she's made in life. Story of my life, not a single academic interpretation I've found supports the themes that jumped off screen to slap me in the face. I'm very much attuned to the role of the patron's projections in the contemplation of art and storytelling. Even so, more often than not, academic analyses miss the mark for me. The intellectual masturbation often represents the furthest thing from the artist's intentions, knowing what I know about the drive we storytellers all share. This case was no different. One analysis I came across did superficially compare the movie musical's story template to that of Beauty and the Beast, considering its themes of the deceptive nature of appearances, its gentle warning not to judge a book by its cover. Another article compared Phantom to the template behind The Hunchback of Notre Dame in its themes of the meek shall inherit / overcome. It seems the burgeoning values of individualism, personal liberty, justice, and equanimity fueled stories 70 years apart, like both Victor Hugo's Hunchback and the original Phantom of the Opera novel by Gaston Leroux. The quintessence of this familiar template would, of course, be Christ's parable of the rich man and the beggar, or Lazarus. The above were superficial comparisons in my estimation. Some analyses went a bit deeper, pointing out that the Phantom, Eric's, abduction of Christine to the catacombs beneath the Paris Opera mimics Pluto's abduction of both Eurydice and Persephone to the underworld, a comparison with which I agree. And herein lies the thrust of my interpretation. Comparing the catacombs to Hades hit the nail on the head. Though the outcome and message differ between the two myths, both Eurydice in the Orpheus myth and Persephone, queen of the underworld, were spirited off to the Greco-Roman underworld by Hades or Pluto. More contemporary versions of this template appear in both Robin Williams' vehicle What Dreams May Come and the blockbuster Inception. Clearly, in light of the phenomenal success of Phantom both on and off Broadway and the box office success of Inception, the template encapsulates something very universal and resonant about the human condition. We all spend time in Hades, however seasonally. Hang in there, I'll explain. I was not wrong to read what I did into the simple story of Phantom of the Opera. For one, Andrew Lloyd Webber supplemented the original literary content of the novel in crafting his stage version, as is par for the course. I'd sat in on 12 years of story development meetings at Disney Feature Animation, with the likes of Stephen Schwartz, Alan Menken, and Howard Ashman. This experience, combined with an undying love for Jesus Christ Superstar, Evita, and other works by Webber, meant that I had a clue about his mindset and artistic sensibilities. But beyond that, and more prescient to the conversation about Muse, Hades, or the underworld, is the place from which all inspiration derives. In mythology, the underworld can be viewed as the fertile subconscious, in which the roots grow deeper during barren winters, where the seeds of life germinate in darkness to sprout in the form of inspiration. The very term Hades, both the mythic figure and the realm he keeps, derives from the ancient Greek root Hades, the unseen. The figure's other name, Pluto, conflated with Plutus or Pluton in some traditions, means the wealthy one, or the giver of wealth, for somewhat obvious reasons. For one, mineral wealth like diamonds and gems are excavated from the earth. Secondly, the earth cultivates the seeds necessary for a bountiful harvest. When considered together, the very etymology of both archetypal terms suggests that the richness of life is in the unseen realm. In this way, the time we spend in the invisible realm, however melancholy, births transformation. Artists and storytellers are masters at harvesting the fruits of the unseen realm. It could be said the stuff of life germinates in the matrix of shadow, coming to fruition via inspiration or epiphany. This is the very definition of the creative process, which renders the abduction template the perfect metaphor for calling or muse in Phantom of the Opera. Carl Jung spoke of shadow archetypes and the shadow self. Jungian analysts have since carried his ideas further. Thomas More, in Care of the Soul, encourages us to embrace the shadow side of human nature. Countless other traditions, some over-romanticized, support this view. Rilke's Letter to a Young Poet concurs that it's the shadow side of human nature we access for inspiration. Despite the latter reference perpetuating romantic notions about angst and suffering for one's art, neither the shadow self nor the shadow side of human nature need be viewed as negatives. Just as Hades was a fertile place rich with invisibles, so is our shadow. Emotionally and spiritually speaking, all growth and transformation is known to come from adversity. So in a way, even angst and turbulence have immense value. I resonate with the word passion as a convenient euphemism for the tempestuous conflict we often face within. But in this context, shadow simply refers to the invisible. In previous chapters, I've spoken of the invisible realm of ideas, beliefs, concepts, norms, mores, ethics, codes, and principles that evolve neck and neck with our biology. I've referenced many traditions that consider the evolution of the noosphere, this postulated conceptual sphere, equally crucial to our survival as that of our biology. But the invisible realm of the subconscious, represented by Hades, the one we tap into when idle or when the lightning strike of inspiration opens the floodgates, may be a bit more right-brained than the conceptual realm of our philosophical ideas, a bit more visceral. Artists have long illuminated the underlying passion, love, connection, attachment, and desire that is synonymous with our humanity. Our dreams and even daydreams, our intuition, all dwell in this nonlinear space. We glimpse it when still, having surrendered to the moment, when theta waves flow. It's said that the present moment is where the eternal intersects with space-time. Here, in the gaps between daily toil, lies the ineffable that often defies language or intellect. It is here that life's richness resides in my economy, in all that does not fit in a definitive box, in those inconvenient spaces between round holes and square pegs. It's we artists who illuminate and celebrate the nonsensical, the novel, and the absurd. The life residue that germinates in shadow can sometimes be the unsavory stuff of life. In that way, the redemption artists glean and illuminate can be thought of as a cleansing of sorts, making lemonade of lemons. Even so, the relationship with muse can be complicated. Cycles of germination and inspiration go largely unexamined by the artist, but the catharsis provided by creative expression rarely does. By extension, this catharsis is then offered to the patron and the collective. But this byproduct, the crucial role of art and storytelling in our dialectic, is often left for academics like Aristotle, Ayn Rand, or David Bohm to examine. Transcendent of the nuts and bolts of craft, the muse or calling is that elusive voice contemporary pop culture seems obsessed with finding. The idea of finding one's voice, whatever the vehicle of expression, has become cultural vernacular. Sometimes we hungrily pursue this calling. Other times we simply tolerate it. Sometimes it nags. We can lose our voice and rediscover it like Maya Angelou. It can compete with relationships, as beautifully portrayed in Phantom. I can cite many anecdotal examples from my own life. During my tenure at Disney Feature Animation, I shared an apartment with the daughter of a fellow production artist. He and I had worked on many of the same films, so I knew his ex-wife as well, the mother of my roommate. She claimed the man's art was like a lover with which she could not compete, hence their divorce. Obeying the muse or feeding the beast? On a separate occasion, I made the fatal error on a date of saying I'd sacrificed for my art. I've since learned to swap out the word sacrificed for invested. The wording did smack of martyrdom, admittedly. Still, the reaction I received was overblown. "I've heard that feeding the beast crap," my date bellowed, reducing me to Joan of Arc while exposing the chip on his shoulder that clearly came from a very bad experience. Or 3. He went on to invalidate the pursuits of my entire adult life by framing the idea of feeding the beast as selfish. Up to then, I'd been blissfully ignorant to this view of artist as Peter Pan, selfishly feeding some beast while living off government grants or otherwise leeching off society, playing around on the public dime. Despite my ignorance, my date made sure to bring me up to speed on this view of artists. We'd all dabbled in art as children, using crayons. Artists simply chose to ride that wave as far as it would take them. At the time of my educational coffee date, it took place in my 30s, I think, I'd only been surrounded by artists living their best lives, contributing, and feeling the satisfying completion of the creativity circuit. This man's harsh indictment of creatives compelled me to think about it. I suppose I had seen examples of the selfish artist cliché. In the 80s, the sitcom Family Ties featured Alex P. Keaton, an ultra-conservative teenager played by Michael J. Fox. Lest the term conservative teenager come across as a contradiction in terms, it should be noted that conservatism was Alex's chosen backlash, having been raised by left-wing hippies. In one episode, Alex debates with Nick, his sister Mallory's artist boyfriend. At first glance, Nick is seemingly a slacker. "Why don't you do something with your life?" Alex asks him. "Something important." "Like you?" Nick returns. "Yes, I'm going to med school. I'm going to save lives." After a pensive beat, Nick drops a bomb of profundity. "Yes, but what are you saving them for?" At the risk of beating the dead horse of the obvious, the suggestion of the 80s sitcom is this: what redeems life, makes it worth living, is the beauty, meaning, and truth artists illuminate, place on a pedestal, or frame for the rest of us. Everything else is survival, drudgery. Art is the redeeming part of life, the why part of the existential equation.